Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Farnborough International Air Show at this historic airfield some 30 miles southwest of London, one of the world's most important gatherings of government officials, military officers, industry leaders, and aircraft from all around the world, this year commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Royal Air Force as the world's first independent Air Force. Our coverage here is sponsored by Farnborough International and Leonardo DRS, and we're here at the DoD Corral to talk to Eric Fanning, who heads the Aerospace Industries Association. Eric, it's been a gangbuster week. You're here all the way to the bitter end, and I know why you are, because you're such a fan of the rocketry competition every year, an international event with American high schoolers. You were telling me a great story about how these teams learn each other's languages, whether it's French or Japanese, in order to participate. Tell us a little bit about some of the key takeaways from this year's competition, because you've always said that's one of the things you really look forward to at the end of the show.
Yeah, it's absolutely my favorite part of the job, and it was our team, by the way, that learned French and Japanese, because half of the international challenge is based on a presentation that they give the day before the actual rocketry fly-off. And like I said, last year's winning team, an American team, learned to speak the language of the judges, which gave them a little bit of a leg up. So it is 4 teams. It's the British, French, and Japanese associations have teams as well. And we had the fly-off this morning. So most of what we do as an association is earlier in the week, but we stay because we support those kids. Raytheon brings them over to Farnborough and Paris in alternating years, and it's just it's inspiring to see what these kids do. They really are going to be the future leaders in our industry.
How did the team stack up this year?
Well, we won't know until this afternoon. Nobody knows. I won't know until it's literally announced on the stage. But the American teams have won the last 3 years in a row, and so we're optimistic. But all 4 of the rockets went off, were recovered almost really right on the pad. We had to be very careful where they were landing. So it's probably going to be pretty tight. We don't even know the results of the presentation from yesterday.
But this is a very, before we get to the meat, sort of the discussion of this very important trade show and the fact that you've been incessantly busy along with all the delegations here, very big DoD presence and U.S. government presence as well, which is always a good sign at a time when the United States wants to engage better with its allies and partners. But talking about the education mission of the Aerospace Industries Association, I mean, I know the rocketry challenges have been going on for as long as I've been covering the industry or covering the association, whether it's domestically in the United States in terms of teams as well as internationally. Talk to us about all of the things you're doing, because that, to you, has been a very important charge to grow the next generation of leaders in the industry.
Right. I'd say that in terms of educating, there's 2 aspects of it that are related. One is to make sure that the country, our government, others know the economic impact of the aerospace industry. It's 2.4 million workers. They make 81% more than the national average in wages. The industry paid $220 billion in wages and benefits last year. And so it's an enormous economic impact. It's the largest contributor to the trade surplus of any manufacturing sector, $86 billion net trade surplus. And so that's something that we want to keep getting out there and reminding people how big and how important the industry is. It's also meant, as you said, to inspire the next generation workforce. Workforce is the single most important thing to CEOs, not just in aerospace, but across manufacturing right now. The engineering unemployment rate, the unemployment rate for engineers is below 2%. And so it's a critical issue for them today. And we got to be working on making sure that we're planting the seeds for the next generation, which is why we do these things like the Rocketry Challenge. At the moment, it was, as we end here on Friday, I originally wanted to do this over a beer or a martini, but you've got work to do, and so do we. Give us some of the impressions that you have from this week. It's a challenging time. Most of the time we go into these air shows, they're sort of set piece affairs. Everybody sort of understands what's going to happen. This time we're going into it with a lot of transatlantic tension. There's a trade war, trans-Pacific trade war brewing, transatlantic trade war brewing. We've seen a lot of messages. We were talking earlier how many companies that were pointing out, hey, and by the way, we have this product that's ITAR free that allows, the United States can't touch this. There have been a couple of folks who've been talking about, not meaning it judgmentally, but the popularity of the president that will, in their view, will reflect on arms exports. That's something that's very important to the industry. On the one hand, there's a big American delegation here who's trying to engage with allies and drive that partnership and interoperability message that comes from it. On the other hand, you saw what the UK government did in announcing its future combat air strategy, and the Tempest aircraft
That's awfully F-35-like. That's going to be developed as a sovereign capability or developed sovereignly with its European allies. What are some of the things you're picking up? Are there any messages? How does the industry try to help in this process where some fear that there will be repercussions, particularly on defense and aerospace?
You got about 15 questions in that monologue there.
Well, I wanted to give you the right setup and let you take any avenue you wanted on it, Eric.
Let me start by saying there's a lot of excitement this year. We released, while we were here, our Facts and Figures annual report that has the 2017 numbers in it. It was a banner year for aerospace. Everything about this year says we're going to do even better. And so in that sense, there's a foundation of excitement. Obviously, the industry benefits greatly, has done very well. Our companies and our workforce through free trade. We get what the administration is focused on in terms of fair trade. We support that as well. Protecting our intellectual property is very important. We just hope that all interested parties will come together and figure out some solutions on this that don't unnecessarily impact the free trade that's been so beneficial to the industry. But I would say this, we certainly do better in environments of predictability and stability in terms of planning, but it really comes down to the quality of the American product. And what I saw here this week was a lot of excitement, the strengths of those international partnerships and alliances that are long-standing, they're strong, and they'll endure based on, again, the quality of that American product. And so there's a lot of optimism, but a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on and are being cautious about planning and what they might do in the future based on sort of the lack of predictability in the environment we find ourselves right now. But very strong showing of the United States government at this air show. We probably had more senior people across the agencies we work with, NASA, FAA, DoD, Commerce, State, than we've had in memory. Lots of sales recorded leading up to this show and announced at this show, and a really good year for the industry.
And also a little bit counter-cyclical, right? Folks expected there not to be as many Chinese orders here from American industry, and Boeing landed some very big Chinese orders. So that sort of gives lie to that notion that because of the Trans-Pacific tension, that China wouldn't be buying it. I mean, look, one of the other things is the demand for the airplanes are so hot that neither one of the companies can satisfy the demand. So it's not like if you stop buying from Boeing, all of a sudden Airbus is going to be able to further increase it.
It is our biggest, on the civil side, biggest order book they've ever had. And that gets to the point of the fact that these partnerships are long-term and stable. You can't just turn on a dime or necessarily find another supplier for that type of equipment. Back to your point about British Aerospace, there's always been competition. I think we have a clear advantage, and we know we can't take that for granted. Competition's good for the industry. We do really well in a competitive environment, and the American aerospace and defense companies realize that they have to keep focused on it to keep that competitive edge.
The administration, so there was a couple of other news items, both beneficial for the industry. One was the unconventional arms transfer, and I'd like you to talk about that. And then also the apprenticeship manufacturing initiative that the White House also released. Let's take it from the conventional arms transfer standpoint. What do you see as good, bad, and ugly on that?
Well, I think it's a very positive step. The devil's in the details, of course, and we need to see how it's going to be actually implemented. But they took a number of AIA recommendations. This is something AIA has been working on for a very long time. The idea is not to get no's to yeses, it's to get to the right answer as efficiently as possible so that people can plan around it and we're not holding anybody sort of dangling while they were waiting for a decision. And so we are encouraged by what they've announced. They are focused on this. They've been very collaborative, the administration, and working with industry to figure out the best way to move forward on this. And I think a transparent system benefits everybody and helps us get to the right answer faster. But the devil's in the details, and so we need to see the actual implementation plan. But they've indicated that they'll continue to work with us and are looking for our help to define the best way forward on this.
And just to give a shout out to your team, Remy Nathan, your Vice President for International Affairs, has been working this issue for so long, and it's extraordinary some of the ideas that he'd hatched some years ago, really getting accepted into this the debate and embraced as policy ultimately.
The two main issues for us that they incorporated. One is to have a strategic focus, so that we're making these decisions not in isolated stovepipes, but from one large sort of grand strategy. So it helps us figure out what should be yes and what should be no. The second is an accountability mechanism. That's the most important part, is how you can track these issues and then drive them when necessary, because right now I kind of describe it as a series of pocket veto opportunities. It's, it's
exactly.
a very complex process just in the Department of Defense, and so if someone doesn't want to move forward, they can just kind of sit on it, and so the transparency is an important part of it.
Well, I mean, you served as a senior official in each of the military services, ending up as Army Secretary, and I know a few times when we talked sort of this like, hey, wait a minute, I thought that was approved. I don't know, why are we still talking about this, right?
Yeah, and again, I saw a lot of things that I thought should be a yes, and they just sat there because it's American jobs, it's American companies, it's interoperability, it brings down the price for the United States if more of them are being made and sold, and it adds to sort of coalition capability. But if the answer is no, we need to get to that too, and let the foreign government know we're not going to do this.
And about the apprenticeship and jobs effort, we saw some of the companies make announcements. Lockheed Martin, I think, said it would add 8,000 apprentices over the next decade, $5 million plus up on their existing program in order to be able to do that. Talk to us a little bit about that apprenticeship standpoint, because everybody is looking at skilling and getting the right skills for the next generation of aerospace worker. Game is changing with both AI, increasing robotization. What was the sense and the take that you got from everybody?
Well, we obviously this is the core of an important issue for us, workforce. And these apprenticeships, it's not just getting engineers, it's also getting people that have technical skills to work on the manufacturing floors. And so the workforce concern runs the gamut. We're all in on this. This is something that our companies, aerospace and defense companies, have been doing for years. With the tax cuts, they're able to put more money into these types of programs, and they stood up in a pretty sizable way yesterday. We're already at over 200,000 from just 30 plus of our members. That number will grow as more members firm up their commitment. You mentioned Lockheed's commitment. They actually stepped it up yesterday, Lockheed and Boeing both, pretty substantially from what they had earlier pledged. And so this industry will be an important part of that because it's important to the industry.
Budget cycle, that's on your mind. There's no reprieve from that. How do you think the budget is going to be shaping up, shaking out? And any of those early indicators, again, I mean, the conventional wisdom is next year is going to be a big year, 19 will be another big year, but then in 20 we're going to see a flattening out. Do you see anything indicating any differently from that? And also on the 19 measure, what do you see as sort of good news? What do you see as bad news that you guys are working to try to get straightened out before it becomes law?
18's a good year. We're optimistic about 19. The way I sort of approach this is we need to give sufficient resource to the agencies to do what we ask them to do. Having had to always find bill payers in my own budget, it just sub-optimizes programs, lengthens the amount of time before they're fielded, and in some cases results in them never being fielded at all. And so when we're on the Hill, we're saying you're asking these agencies to do a set of things. You need to make sure you give them the resource to do them as effectively and efficiently as possible. We don't take it for granted, though. We still have sequestration out there. And so after 18, after 19, we don't take 19 for granted either. We got to work a budget deal for 20 or we're going to go back down to a pretty low number and a pretty sizable hit to the budget. That's a really difficult environment for companies to plan, for the government to plan. We need some longer term stability in the budgeting process, and we need to get back to regular order on the Hill where we actually have a budget when we start the year. We're worried about that this year as we worry about it every year, and that these agencies and the companies that support them can look into the future and plan adequately.
Are there, I mean, there is concern about what happens to the global economy. It's been on an upward trajectory. It's a very plottable upward trajectory. It's almost exponential in terms of the angle of ascent. We spoke to the Spanish ambassador to the United States, Pedro Moronés, and he said, look, even Spain, that was really struggling, is now starting to hit its stride, is able to increase defense spending. He did express a little bit of reservation on even if we wanted to, we're not even sure we could spend 1.8% if we doubled it. But the bigger question is that there are folks who are concerned about whether there might be a downturn. You've seen some of the news here with the European Union sort of girding for a hard Brexit. The UK situation, senior officials in the UK just see that as sort of a bargaining maneuver on the part of the EU when it sees that the UK is still a little bit unsteady. Is anybody talking about the potential budgetary implications? We've got borrowing rates continue to go up. We have a huge national debt, and all of that works as long as the economy continues to grow apace. But if it's a sudden slowing because of trade actions, Brexit going very badly, right? Somebody sneezes and the whole world kind of catches a cold kind of model. Is anybody looking at
what a potential downturn would be? Are any of the member companies sort of girding themselves as they look and hope for an optimistic future, but sort of hedge for something that may be less successful as maybe everybody would like economically?
Yeah, I mean, well, these companies plan for everything. They have a very long-term planning horizon. They certainly make assumptions in their planning, but they prepare for whatever the economy and the other factors that impact their planning might be. And so yeah, they're all talking about that right now, but they always do. They've weathered upturns, they've weathered downturns. They've done this before. Right now they're focused on this year, coming off of a great last year, 2017.
And one last thing, what's your key to a successful and happy air show?
Getting home. No, the AIA team is amazing. This is the first air show I've done in this job, and it's really remarkable what a small team has done. I would say the biggest success for me is not having seen all the glitches that always happen. They've taken care of that. But to me, the most exciting thing will be watching the American team declared victor here today at the Rocketry Challenge.
Well done. And Sherry does a terrific job keeping all of these trains on track. Thanks very much.
All right, good to see you.